What is up, Knoll Nation? I'm Jesse from Plant the Spear. This is my co-host Michael, and we are coming to you on this Friday as early signing day is approaching. Got a lot of big name transfers in Tallahassee this weekend. There's a lot going on, or is there, Michael? There's
Or
not
is
really,
there?
really hasn't been a lot going on lately. There's a lot of talk about what might happen, but there's not been a whole lot popping off. So
Yeah.
in this episode, we're going to talk about, is it time to panic or is it time to be patient and just let things play out? And so we're going to get into that, talk about kind of the weekend that is coming up for Florida State, a very big weekend with a lot of big names on campus, like we mentioned. But before we get into that, Michael, how are you, my friend? Thank you for joining me.
Oh, Jesse, thanks for having me again. Always love to be a part of Plant the Spear. Doing all right, just trying to like every other FSU fan, just trying to see what's gonna happen, what's gonna pop, what transfers coming in, what high school recruit we're gonna be able to snag. Looking at you, Jeremiah Smith, and hoping for the best.
Yeah, I think that's the one that everybody really has circled on their list. And speaking of signing day flips, we're not even to signing day yet, but it does appear that there is going to be a flip.
Yeah.
Another kind of 5-star finding their way somewhere else, close to signing day. It's kind of almost become
A
a
tradition.
tradition now. It's as much as you hate to say it, but all signs right now point to 5-star defensive lineman Armando Blunt flipping back his
Yeah.
commitment back to Miami. And that's the key word there, is back. He was already committed to them once.
Correct.
He flipped his commitment to Florida State. And at the time of recording this, around 4 o'clock on Friday, 5 minutes ago, he tweeted a picture of him holding up the U. So everything looks like that. His official visit to Florida State this weekend was canceled. So it looks like he's going to be back with the Hurricanes. But, we did an early signing day episode earlier this week, and my friend Taylor from Norvell Central said that was the one he was worried about.
Yeah.
When you just think about, he's a South Florida guy. He was already committed to them. They pushed really hard for him. And, I'm sure they probably made him a sweet offer at the end as well, too, to get him in the boat. I don't want to suspect on anything, but
Right.
it does get a little bit old, to lose these guys. But at the same time, I'll kick it back to you. But I will say this, I think in the grand scheme of things, it's frustrating to see it happen again, but
Yeah.
you don't really feel terrible about it because you know that you do have Marvin Jones Jr. visiting this weekend as well from the
Correct.
transfer market. This is a
Yeah.
guy that will still have multiple years of eligibility, former 5-star guy that, honestly, and I don't mean to say this as like a salty FSU fan, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's always like, as soon as a kid flips his commitment, well, he wasn't any good. I'm
Right.
not saying that, but I'm saying,
Nope.
like, if I had my choice, I would take probably the guy who was a former 5-star that has 2 years of strength and conditioning and development and experience and
From
coaching
Georgia.
at the University of Georgia, who's
Yeah.
he was part of at least one of their national championship
That's
teams.
right.
So I'm okay with this trade, but again, man, it just comes down to that, it's just still problems with some closing things
Yeah.
towards early signing day. So I'll let you share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think again with Blunt, like you said, he's a South Florida kid. And even when he had, flipped his commitment to Florida State, Miami didn't let up. The scuttlebutt out there, and I'm not saying whether this is true or not. It's just what I've heard through a bunch of different people that, even when he was on his visit to Florida State, Miami was calling him during the visit, trying to get him, back in their good graces, and or they were trying to get back in his good graces and all those different things. And he had people in his ear, man. He's a South Florida kid. So all his family, all the people, they wanted him to come to Miami. It's closer for them to go and see the game. And man, when you're an 18, 19-year-old kid and you got all that pressure on you, at some point you just wonder if he just said, whatever, forget it. It's close to home. I'll just go here. I've always liked the U, blah, 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 and maybe Miami sweetened the deal a little bit. I don't buy the notion that Miami outbidded Florida State in the NIL. I think Florida State's NIL structure and organization can compete with anybody in the country. So I don't buy that. I just think the kid, probably just was like, look, this is home, so I'll go here. But what I will say, though, on the other side of that, so that's the positive side. On the other side, though, we do have a problem with closing on high school defensive linemen over the last couple of years. And I know based on just the stuff I've seen on Twitter or X, whatever you call it, and just recruiting sites all across, all on the internet, is that, recruiters are using, Odell's age and how long he's going to continue to coach there as a negative against Florida State. and they've struggled. Him, Odell, and John Papuchis, they've struggled at closing these high-end defensive linemen out of the high school ranks. And they've proven that they can develop them. That's not a problem. And that's what blows my mind is like, man,
Right.
I don't understand how these high school
I
kids are
know.
not looking at
I
what
know.
they've done with Jermaine Johnson and Jared Verse and Pat Payton. And I mean, all these guys and Fabian Lovett and Josh Farmer. I mean, look at the Brandon Fisk. And I know Braden Fisk, I know you might say, well, they already came pre-developed. No, they were all unpolished. Even
Right.
Jermaine Johnson even said, one of the reasons why he couldn't crack the starting lineup at Georgia was because he was just undeveloped in a lot of ways, and Odell just changed the game for him. So it's like I'm looking at these high school D-line prospects, and I'm like, okay, you want the bag, I get it, you're trying to get that for your family, but you're going to go to a program, in this case Miami, where they've proven they can't develop talent. Now their philosophy is, look, let's just stack talent on talent so that it can overcome our coaching deficiencies, because they have glaring coaching deficiencies. And so I think that's an issue that I think Mike Norvell at some point in this offseason is going to have to address. And I love Odell. I mean, he is the unconquered Seminole, and he's a mainstay of the Bobby Bowden era. But I wonder if it might be time. And I think that's a question that Mike Norvell is going to have to address this offseason.
Yeah. I mean, there's always been that debate, and it's been that way
Right.
for the last few years. Like you said, we just haven't really signed. I mean, I think probably off the top of my head, and I could be missing a few here because, Lord knows we try to forget a certain
Right.
period there of a few years, but I think Marvin Wilson might have been one of your last real top tier defensive tackles that you were able to find, and that really didn't even pan out too well for you
Yeah.
there. But
Yeah.
I think, you bring up a good point though. It is strange because they have such a good track record with
Yes.
developing guys.
Yes.
It's so strange, and then I think that you've also been able to cover things a little bit. When
Yeah.
you talk about transfer market and bringing in guys like Braden Fisk and bringing in
Right.
Fabian Lovett and all these guys that you were able to bring in, you've kind of gotten away with not being able to sign a lot of guys there.
Correct.
But I do think that it is something that you're going to have to, I mean, yeah, they got KJ Sampson, who was a 4-star, who's still a young guy that's coming up, but
Right.
you've lost a little bit of your young talent there. So you need to start building that depth from the high school
Yep.
ranks
Yep.
to where you don't have to go to the portal every year. And of course, we love the portal.
Right.
I look like it is Black Friday Christmas shopping or something like that. This is exciting to me. I can't wait to see who we get.
Yes.
But I think you want to feel good about the guys that you have there, and the
Correct.
trenches are somewhere that you typically like to feed from the high school ranks because
Right.
there's just not a lot of them available. So, yeah, man, there's a little bit of a tough conversation that may need to be had between him and Coach JP and
Yep.
even at linebacker as well.
Yeah.
That's another
Don't get me
situation
started
where,
on that one.
right? Sertan and Fuller are really about your only two top recruiters on that side. Now, I know
Correct.
Randy Shannon is involved in a lot of the South Florida recruiting, so I don't want to take that away from him, but
Correct.
you're kind of not bringing in a whole lot of guys at your own position, which is a
Correct.
problem because even Blake Nicholson, that was a lot of the Derek Ray connection. So
Correct.
there may be some things when you talk about just strictly from the recruiting side that have to be addressed at some point in the future. I just think, for me personally, I think Odell has earned the right to stay as long as he wants to, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
because of the development, he's one of the best coaches in the game.
I think that's
It's
fair too. Yeah.
right. It's just you got to find a way to get some guys on the defensive line. You
Yep.
just have to. And so
Right.
you lose this one. You did lose Keldrick Falk last year as well. So, I mean, the thing is, they get them and they get them committed. It's just the closing part that's hard.
Right.
And,
Right.
I do think Miami probably, again, I don't want to speculate, but I do think Miami probably did sweeten the deal towards the end there.
Yeah.
And people have to remember, I mean, Cristobal is a good recruiter.
Yes.
They hired that staff with a lot of guys that were built to recruit. So,
Right.
I mean, it's part of it. But the thing is, too, that you also see a lot of their top talent, like you said, the way they don't necessarily develop well.
Right.
You see a lot of their guys hit the portal later on. I mean, you have a couple of their guys that have hit the portal, their top guys, even on offense.
Yep.
With the Jacoby George kid and
right.
Jabari Harvey, you got some of those guys that hit the portal. So we'll see, man. They're definitely gonna have to go to the portal probably to fill some gaps here now. If you lose that, especially on the defensive line, and we talk about the portal too. You have Malcolm Ray, who, and again,
That's
guys,
right.
I can't tell you who's officially in the portal. We don't have access to that database, but I
Right.
can tell you who's listed in the 247 database. And, we've talked about the guys in the past, but just looking at the defensive line, you've got Ayobami Tafasi that
Yep.
has intended or entered one of the two. And then you have Malcolm Ray as
Yep.
well. So there's two of your depth guys that you're losing. So you're going to need to get a couple pieces there. Now, I will say, again, like if you can get Marvin Jones Jr., that's huge
That's
because
big.
that's a 5-star ready-made guy who can come in and start for you day one.
Yeah.
I think and it depends.
Or at
Like
least challenge for
we
starting.
99.9% believe Jared Verse is probably going to the NFL this year. So you would plug him in across from Patrick Payton. If he does, I don't know, maybe he just loves Tallahassee. Maybe that
Right.
honey fried chicken really is what they say it is. Maybe he just comes back. Either way, you have really a 3-deep rotation of 3 of the best
Right.
defensive ends in the country. And he did play a little bit of stand-up linebacker at Georgia too. I think that's part of the reason he wanted to get out of there because they weren't really using him how they were supposed to. He dealt with a little bit of injury too. So maybe he could be a hybrid player for you as well. Now, speaking of visits this weekend, obviously they got a lot of their guys that are currently committed to Tribe 24 coming in.
Yep.
So they're trying to lock those guys up because, again, you don't want to let too many of these guys go. I know the only other one that people are talking about is KJ Bolden to Auburn. I don't really think that's going to be the case. I think he's going to end up at Florida State. I just think you also have to think about, if they throw like and even if this is the case with Blunt, and I don't know that to be the reason, but if they were to throw a, just absurd bag at a kid, like you can't really blame them for taking it if they're going to overpay. And that's the thing too, when you talk about can Florida State compete, because in the NIL space, of course they can. We know they can. The Battle's End is one of the best collectives in the country.
Correct.
It's whether they want to. Because, they're not going to let the kid set the market. The market's going to set the market. So they're not going to overpay. And if Miami wants to do that, you let them do it. And then, maybe you pick them up in the portal a few years later. But looking at some of the guys that are on campus this weekend for their visits, of course, we know you have Washington State quarterback Cam Ward already in. By the time you watch this, he's probably already going to be on his way back out of Tallahassee. That is someone that we're going to talk about a little bit here. DJ Uyunglele. Oregon State.
You're killing it.
I'm getting better at this name.
You're killing it.
I'm trying. I'm telling you, I've been practicing a lot. And I will give you a tip to all the FSU people out there. If you put it in your keyboard a few times, like 4 or 5 times, predictive text will remember it and it will be your best friend. So, but you got to make sure you spell it right, because the first few times when I spelled it wrong, I saved the wrong one in there. And I was like, oh no, we got to fix that. So DJU is on campus this weekend as well. So you got 2 quarterbacks there you're looking at. Of course, Marvin Jones Jr., we already talked about him. He's going to be in this weekend as well. Now, I will say this while we're talking about these guys. They did have a Georgia linebacker hit the portal. Now,
the starting linebacker.
Right. I've heard some rumblings that there could be a special guest that was coming with Marvin Jones
heard
Jr.
that too. Yep.
I haven't necessarily confirmed that through anybody, but that's what I've heard. And that linebacker, Dumas Johnson out of Georgia, this would be a home run get for Florida. If you could get these two as a package, if you get that 5-star edge player and you get a guy who, he was a first-team preseason All-American, has 126 tackles, 17 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks, has experience at Georgia. If you could get these two, oh man, I would breathe a huge sigh of relief for that defense just to know that
I get real juicy.
Right. I mean, that is like 2 basically plug and play starters right there. So those are the big transfers that you got on this weekend. So we'll talk about them. Then we'll get into some high school kids. You also, well, I'll save him for the high school, the reclassified kid. But yeah, man. So let's first talk about these 2 quarterbacks. Then we'll talk about a little bit about the other transfers too. So you got Cam Ward coming in. Everybody loves Cam Ward. Everybody wants Cam Ward. I want Cam Ward. You want we all want Cam Ward.
We all want Cam Ward.
We all want Cam Ward. Whether they get him or not, it still remains to be seen. Like, I think when you look from just a purely where's the best fit, where can he be the most successful? I think when you look at what he can do coming into Florida State with in this offense, he's probably going to be an almost immediate Heisman contender just from the numbers that he's put up and everything. But I actually did a whole video that you guys can check out on the channel about why I think DJU could be the answer for Florida State. I think he's going to be your most likely option that you're going to land when you just look at what you're going to have to financially do to get them. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
I mean, it sounds weird to say, man, but it's college football nowadays.
yep,
What you're gonna have to pay to get them. And I think DJ can do everything that you want to do in this offense. I think he's more of a high floor guy. Cam Ward's more of a high ceiling guy. But Cam Ward again, man, he's had 76 turnovers in his career,
yep,
and he's had 40 plus sacks the last 2 seasons, according to PFF. I mean, those are scary numbers
yeah,
when you look at what Clemson's offense, did with turnover problems this year
yep,
and sack problems too. So, I already did like a whole 30-minute video on why I think DJU could win. I love Cam Ward if they end up landing him. I think either one of these guys, depending on what you put around him, I
yeah.
think either of these two guys put you in that 10-win ACC competing for ACC championship, 12-team playoff type of window. So I'll let you share your thoughts on the two guys and what you think about them.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think you go wrong with either guy. Do I think one guy has a little higher ceiling than the other? Yeah, I think Cam Ward has, well, let me go here. DJ is the prototypical quarterback that Mike Norvell used to have in his offense. When you go back and look at Memphis, his time at Memphis, and even Arizona State, that big, bulky quarterback who can throw and run, and is able to take a beating and
Right.
more so probably hand out a beating. But you look at DJ, and he has a 59% completion percentage. He's thrown for 8,300 yards. He's got 57 touchdowns and 24 interceptions. He had 7 interceptions this past season, 21 touchdowns, 2,600 over 2,600 yards. But when you look at his rush stats, Oregon State only ran him, or he scrambled 68 times for 219 yards, 6 touchdowns, right? But then you go over to Cameron, and I just see, in some ways, maybe, and I hesitate to even say this, but I see a stronger Jordan Travis and Cam
Right.
Ward. That Jordan Travis was amazing for his ability to like get in a phone booth and basically make people miss, right? I mean, you think about the Florida game where he like got out of like 50 different sacks, LSU game, the Oklahoma game, like all those different games where he just made people in such a small space miss them, and he was able to turn a terrible play into something amazing. And I think Cam Ward has that same ability. Cam Ward this year ran 120 times for 144 yards. So he did get sacked a lot for sure, but he just has that like intangibility of like, he can make you miss. Now, part of the sack, if you go back and look at Washington State, is they didn't really have a great offensive line. And so he was running for his life a lot of the time. And then he would also hold the ball too long, which, remember, this year we complained about that a lot with Jordan Travis as well. So I don't think you go wrong with either one. Now, if it's me, Michael Hinton, and you're asking which quarterback I would want, Cam Ward. Here's what I wouldn't do, though. I'm not going to pay $1 million for that kid. We have a great team so far going into next season, like a team that can make the college football playoff, that can challenge for the ACC championship again. I'm not saying we can win it all, but right now, as the team's constructed, we have a great team going in. And I'm not going to risk that team and not getting the right players to fill the holes that we need to fill by overpaying for a quarterback that, let's just be real, I don't know if he's worth $1 million. I just don't. And so if DJ comes in cheaper and Mike Norvell sees the culture and all like that stuff and thinks he can develop him, boom, go with that. I'll be happy.
Yeah, and to be honest, I've heard $1 million is only about halfway there.
That's
So
what I heard too.
it
Yeah.
depends on how much. And something I talked about in the other video too is Miami may be willing to pay that because they need to win sooner than later, because that new car smell has come off of that staff down there, and they don't have the results on the field to really sell a lot of things either. So, yeah, I mean, I think you can win with both. I think, to me personally, I think you need to end up with one of them. You got to take one, and that's no dig at Tate. Tate can still come in and win the job. That's perfectly fine. I just think if you want to win the way you expect to win next year, I think you need a more experienced veteran quarterback. But I will say this, man, it seems like with some of these guys, and again, I don't want to speculate on numbers and the truth of what happened in some of these situations that I just don't know, but it sounds like there's been a few guys, and most people can figure out the names that I'm going to talk about, that are asking for a little bit too rich of a price than
Hmm.
they've proven they're worth. And the battle's in, and the staff is kind of letting them walk, or at least go
Yep.
test the market and find
Yeah.
out, and then maybe come back. So in a way, man, it feels like they're willing to almost go with a youth movement if they
Yep.
have to. Like, they're
Yeah.
willing to trust some of the younger guys. They're willing to let a few of the more veteran guys go, and just, you may have to just roll with a bit of a young squad, and
Yeah.
then see who you can pick up in the portal. And it has been a slow portal season. And I
Yeah.
mean, they really kicked the tires on one offensive lineman so far, Carter Smith from Indiana. He elected to stay there. So you had the Georgia Tech defensive end transfer that
Yep.
committed to South Carolina today. So he's off the board as
Yeah.
well. So I think that's why people are getting a little bit antsy. You see Armando Blunt going to flip back to
Right.
Miami. Florida State has not landed a transfer yet, where
Yep.
you've seen a lot of guys. It's been a weird year in the portal too, man. There's been
Yeah.
guys that, like, they're in the portal on Monday and they're at
And
their
then
new
they're
school on
gone.
Tuesday. So it's
Right.
like there's some funny stuff going on behind some back channels there. But it just feels like we're just kind of sitting on eggshells right now, just kind of
Right.
waiting. Like, we're seeing guys hit the portal. I think there's at least listed in the database. Now, again, like I said, the 247 database, they include announcements and verified ones. So I don't know who actually is in there. We don't have
Right.
access to that. But there's, I think, 15 or 16 guys in there now. So you're seeing these guys come out, unless anyone's came in since yesterday. There was 15 yesterday. So you have the 15 guys in there, and I think people are like, all right, well, we're losing and we're not really replacing yet. So
Right.
people get a little antsy. But at the end of the day, man, I think, again, you just have to realize that the nature of the game now is people are going to look for other
Yeah.
opportunities. People are going to be reached out to other schools.
Oh yeah.
People are going to chase more money. Some people are going to be told they need to take it on down the road because they got to make
Correct.
room for other guys that maybe they
Correct.
know are coming in. So I think at the end of the day, you have to trust that the staff has a handle on, one, who they know is on their roster, who they feel is ready to roll in 2024. And then I think you have to understand that, you got to trust what they've done in the portal so far. I mean, they just have one of the best track records in the portal.
Yeah.
And this is something we talked about in pre-show that, obviously you'll echo as well, as this is just the first one, and it's
Yep.
still early. This portal season runs until January the 2nd, and then you have another one that opens up in mid to late April.
Correct.
So, and if you think back, you got Dylan Gibbons late.
Late.
Now, this is obviously they tightened the portal windows a little bit since then. I think he might have even been way after April. He was
Yeah.
way
I think
late.
he was after April.
He was like, yeah, he was way late, and he ended up being a starter for you
Correct.
and an impact player. So,
You didn't get
that
late last year.
right. And these could just be things where, like you mentioned, the position coach changes have already been happened after
Right.
the bowl games or the playoffs or something like that. You also
Correct.
have where you go through spring practice and maybe you're not the number one guy on the list,
Yep.
not where you
Yep.
wanted to be. So that's something to watch too. So I think it is, when you talk about panic or patience, I think with the transfer market right now, it's been slow. And
Right.
this is something that I've mentioned before, where there really wasn't a lot of Power 5 coaching changes this year.
Correct.
So I think that halts a lot of guys from just hitting because they don't, they're familiar with their situation. I mean, even like Arkansas, we thought Sam Pittman was gone. He didn't get fired. So really the ones
Correct.
that I can think of, you had like Oregon State, Michigan State, Duke, and Texas A&M. And really outside of that, I can't think of too many others that had a head coaching change. So I think
Right.
that slows things down in the portal too. But as you see some guys go, Florida State's really good about getting these guys in. So hopefully, to me, you get one of the two quarterbacks. I think you feel good there if you get one of those guys, either one, to be honest. Obviously, if you get Cam Ward, you're doing a backflip in the front yard. But
Right.
if you get either one, I think you're good there. I think if you can get Marvin Jones Jr., and let's be honest, it's a perfect fit. He's a legacy player.
Absolutely.
He was almost committed to here back in his original high school recruitment, but Florida State really was kind of lost in the woods at that point. They really didn't have the success on the field. There was a lot of uncertainties here. Everybody was rumoring Mike Norvell to be on the hot seat at the time in Georgia.
Right.
This is actually something that I got a chance to talk to Marvin Jones in person about, because I got to interview him on an episode, and it was like, at the time, Georgia was just they're coming off a national championship. Right. They won another, that program was stable at the time. So it was a good decision and a good program for him to go to at the time. But you feel like that's a guy that should be a can't miss in this situation. And so I think if you can get him, and if you can bring the linebacker, Dumas Johnson, in with him, then man, I feel like you already feel a ton better about where you
Yeah,
stand going into 2024 because you really bolstered up that defensive side of things.
correct.
And then you got your guy, a guy at quarterback that at least is going to create competition. So I think if you can land a couple of those guys, obviously you'll have to wait and see who else comes in. But then,
Yeah.
again, you might just have to play some young guys next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just think it's, I'm with you. I don't think we should be panic yet. I don't think this is panic season. I think we're still in the patient season of the off season. And the reason I say that is because here's the thing. When you look at all these players who are entering the portal from Florida State, you know, if we take off our fan hat and we just kind of look at it from an outside view perspective and a little bit of their perspective, is this is the only way these kids can negotiate, right? They don't necessarily have agents. Now agents are introduced and you can have a representative and all like this, but there's not like a structure for how negotiations are supposed to go. And these are 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids who don't fully know the business of college football, right? And so their only recourse right now is, if they are not hearing the number or what they want to hear as far as playing time and all that stuff, they will get on Twitter and they will say, hey, I love Florida State, but this is a difficult decision. I'm going to enter my name into the transfer portal, right? And then what happens then is now they believe it gives them leverage to negotiate with the collectives and stuff, right? And you saw that with Pat Payton. He said he was going to enter into transfer portal. Ingram Smith of the Battle's End came out and said, look, we don't negotiate through social media. Then a few days later, Pat Payton deletes a tweet, and as of right now, as of 4:37 on today, he has not entered the transfer portal. So you see some of that going, and what I want to encourage you, let's not get too caught up in who puts a tweet out and who doesn't, because at the end of the day, what matters is once they actually, sometimes when a player actually officially enters, they'll even tweet the email from the transfer portal saying they're actually in. So let's give these coaches the benefit of the doubt that, and in the collective that's proven it can go get the best of the best, the chance to get the players that it needs. And again, like you said, there are two portal seasons. So we're only in portal season number 1, which is up until I think a little bit right after the bowl games are played. And
January 2nd is
January
is the
2nd.
one,
Yep. And there could be, Jesse, as you know very well, there could be players who are currently on bowl teams who have yet to enter the portal because unlike other players, they're focused on trying to play the game. So Mike Norvell and that staff, they're very tuned into that. They have some players that they're probably, and I'm not speculating, I'm not saying there's tampering or anything like that, but I'm just saying they probably are watching some players who are currently on playoff teams, who are currently on high New Year's Six bowl teams, that they're waiting to see if we'll enter the portal, and then they will like maybe push their chips all into play. So that's the first portal season. And then the second portal season is April 16th through the 30th. And as you said, we were able to get Dylan Givens late. We were able to get Keon late. And so, spring practices will solidify kind of if you're going to be on, if you're going to be a part of the plan. And so once a kid realizes, oh, well, maybe they don't have a big plan for me, I need to go somewhere where I can try to play, they're going to enter in the portal. Then you'll have another season as well. And so I'm not worried at all at this point. Now we get to the second portal season and we haven't gotten anybody, then I would say it's time to panic. But I'm not worried at this point of that we're going to not be able to get some the portal guys. And the other thing too, last, and I'll get it back to you, is two quick things. Is that one, Florida State, first of all, every coach in America right now for college football, you have to basically re-recruit your two deep every season now. That's the business now. You have to re-recruit your two deep every season. And there are going to be some on that two deep that you say, hey, look, man, you're on this two deep because we believed in you, but we're actually recruiting over you. You might want to go. So, and they all have those conversations. But also, Florida State is at the point now, and I'll throw this back to you because I'm curious to what you think about this. Florida State's at the point now where it doesn't, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when Norvell and co first got here, they had to hit the portal hard because we had to replace talent. We had to get talent. We had to get depth. But now, and I'm not saying they're all the way there yet, but they're very close to being like a Georgia, like a Alabama, that doesn't necessarily have to rely on the portal, but can go get certain pieces to fit the whole pie. And I think this season we're seeing that. That's why the portal's been slow. They can be very picky about who they want to bring in because they realize they don't need to go get 12 to 15 players from the portal. They only need like 7 to 8 to fit some pieces and maybe a little bit of depth, and then they'll be good.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too depends on the numbers that you need because we don't know who all is going to announce yet, who's
Right.
going to go to the draft. So you don't really know exactly who you need yet, which by the way, Jerryon Jones did announce that he is going to the draft this year, but it sounds like he might play in the Orange Bowl as well. But yeah, man, I think it is a good point because Florida State right now, if you get this class of 24 and you can hold them in the boat or the rest of them, and I will say this too. This staff has been out. You've seen the pictures and all the stuff on social media where they've been heavily out visiting their high school recruits this week. They got the number 3 class in the nation right now. You want to work your tail off to lock those guys up. The transfers, if you get them in when you can get them in, obviously, but you want to keep these guys, your recruits, you want to keep them locked in a week before signing day. So I think that's just really the priority with their time right now. Is locking those guys up. But I think you bring up a good point. I mean, like if you lock in this class and say you have another class like similar to this top 5 class again next year in 25, you're talking about a couple of these classes now where you've built a foundation where you take what you need out of the portal or what you want, should I say, not necessarily whatever's out there. I mean, you back in the day, you had guys like, and this is no dish to the guys that came here. They tried hard and maybe it just didn't work out. But, you had the Marcus Cushney. You had the safety from Jacksonville State that didn't do anything and then left again. Even Bless Harris, who did great for you here at Florida State, came from Lamar. So you're still raising that talent floor, but you've gotten to a better spot now with the classes that you have. I mean, they took that big O-line class back in 2021. And a lot of those guys are still here. You lost 2 in the portal this year, but you bring in some guys this year in that high school class as well. That's talented. So you are building that base. So I think you can be a little more choosy in who you take, and you want to get. You may not be looking for guys like that anymore. You may be looking for those guys from Georgia or the SEC schools or the Big Ten schools. And you also bring up a good point. I mean, think about the playoffs. The first 2 teams that lose, you might have 6, 8 guys hit the portal the next. The next day. So then you could see those free up too. And again, I think this staff is need based, but I think they are definitely willing to go big game hunting. And they know they're in a position right now with a strong NIL collective and success on the field, and probably going to put a bunch of guys in the NFL this year. And the track record you have of developing these transfers and putting them on a high profile. It's going to come. You know what I mean? Like you said before, a lot of these guys reached out to them this year. And it wasn't the opposite way around. So I feel fine about the transfer market. It's just it's been a slow market. A lot of the big names that come out kind of almost knew where they were going to begin with. So we'll wait and see how some things play out. They did. I think I saw them actually reverse this in a court decision the other day. But if it did not happen, they locked down a little bit on that second time transfer rule as well. Everybody jumped. I think they took that back a little bit. Go figure after the season when Daryl Jackson
exactly. No, but basically what happened was it was an injunction that the court gave. I forget. I think it's a West Virginia court gave one of the college students, one of the football players. So there's a 14-day injunction, and so the NCAA then came out and said we will not enforce something with the second time transfer thing, but it's only a 14-day injunction, and so they're still petitioning the courts to obviously reverse that. But right now, what that means is that if you're a second time transfer, you might want to get in the portal right now because
and that's what I was going to say is you can slow the portal moves down by not being allowed to transfer that second time. And you see what happens when they held out Daryl Jackson, when they held out a lot of these other guys. Tez Walker ended up getting his waiver, but when you hold out a lot of these guys, I think a lot of people now are like, let me make sure this is really what I want to do. Before they jump in. So I think you just be patient in the transfer market. Let some things open up. Let them, figure out what they need and all that. And then let's talk about these high school guys that are on campus this weekend. So first up, I want to mention Amari Williams. He is reclassifying from 2025 down to 2024. Man, this is a really talented kid. He's an athlete / edge player. He is current. I don't know. Let's see if they got him, if they re-ranked him yet. Because I know he was, I think, the #1 athlete in 25. So it looks like they do have him 247 has him relisted into 2024 now. And even then, I mean, he's still in the composite. He's the number 9 athlete, 27 player in the state of Florida, 4-star on the composite. So this is a really talented guy. Now, I will say that I've heard that it wouldn't be unthinkable for them to push for a commitment this weekend because he reclassified, then he came straight to FSU on his first visit. But there's a lot of really big names that are involved with this one. So you may not see that commitment happen yet, but I think they will maybe push for that. Again, I will say this, though, as much as obviously we know high school doesn't always come in to make an immediate impact. If you have a guy who's already reclassifying from 25 to 24, I don't know how much of an impact he's going to make as a can you even call that a true freshman, like a negative freshman or
negative
whatever?
freshman?
So, like, you at least it would be nice to get him in the class to help kind of replace the defensive lineman that you're losing. But that is somebody that is going to be on campus this weekend that would be nice to get. Of course, 5-star KJ Bolden is on campus this weekend, and I think this is huge.
This is his official visit,
right? This is the last weekend before signing day. So even if Auburn is making a big push, this is your chance to lock that up. You get the last weekend. You always want the last visit.
Correct. Yeah, and recent intel is suggesting it's not as much Auburn. The Auburn sibling, it's actually Georgia that's now making headway. So it's now a race. What the recruiter heads out there are saying, it's now a race between Georgia and Florida State.
Kirby must be mad that we're getting maybe getting some transfers. He's like, watch this.
Watch this. I'll take this.
Yeah, but I do, man. I just like that you get the last visit before signing day. This fresh. I mean, you're looking at, I think it's next Wednesday. So you're by the time he leaves, 3 days.
Yep.
You can just hang on for
and no more 3 days. And no more in home. So it's not like Georgia can go do an in home or Auburn can do an in home. This is it.
This is it. So I like that he's on there as well for a multi-day visit. And then you have, of course, Cam Davis, 4-star running back. I'm the least worried about Cam Davis. He's been committed forever. Like, man, he might have been committed to Bobby back in the day. I don't know. It feels like he's been committed for so long. But I love Cam Davis. He's got a great family. He's a great kid, and I'm really excited to see him as well. And that's the thing, man. I think when you see, to touch on this real quick, when you see Rodney Hill, which was a bit of a surprise, hit the portal, don't think a lot of people saw that coming. I think this is where you could see them go youth movement. As long as you keep Toa Philly, as long as you keep Keziah Holmes, you still have Sam Singleton, who's a talented guy. We saw him play like 2 plays last year, and it was like, whoa, who was that? Like it was like a flash of lightning. So you get him, then you get Cam Davis in there as well. So I think you may be okay. Like, I think if a really top guy comes out, a running back in the portal, you could look at it. You could kick the tires on that.
Yeah.
But I think, and we still don't know what Trey's going to do. I mean, the thing is about running backs, they only get so many miles on them. So you wouldn't blame him for taking it on down the road.
I was just going to say that. Yep.
You know, if they make it worth it, then maybe he does stay another year. Who knows? I mean, it wasn't quite the year that he had,
last year,
the year before. Right. Yeah. So you could see it. I mean, you could see it.
Well, and that's the thing. When it comes to the Rodney Hill transfer, you like Rodney Hill, you like what he brought. You thought if he could just, break out more, and he got. I mean, he started the ACC championship game.
Yeah.
But you look at it and you're like, and it's kind of what you're seeing in the NFL too, man. It's like running backs are just a dime a dozen right now, and it's a position that, yes, you want someone who has great vision, can run, is fast, a little bulky as well too, can get through the tackles. But man, you have so many of them that it's almost a plug and play position. Really, it's not like quarterback where there's only one, right? You only can have one. It's not like offensive lineman where you can, one at each position, or wide receiver that requires a certain skill. Like the running back is just, it's become a position that, not I won't say devalued, but it certainly doesn't have the same value as it used to have. And so, when you see Rodney Hill go into the portal, that's a good kid. It's a good player.
Yep.
But what Florida State's doing is Florida State is stacking great on top of good. And I imagine Rodney Hill's looking at that room and saying, gosh, I'm going to have to share touches again next year, because no school nowadays is using one primary back who's getting 3/4 of the carry. They're splitting carries like 33% down the line, the top 3 in the rotation. And so if you're trying to increase your stock or anything like that, I can understand why, Hill would want to go to the portal.
Yeah, and they are really deep at running back too.
Yeah,
Florida State
really
was,
deep.
and I really think, like you said, it's more now instead of stacking a bunch of the same guy. You kind of build your running back room for different skill sets. You want that
Correct.
guy who can all-purpose back, a little bit more of a thumper. You know,
Yep.
gadget
Lightning.
back.
Yep.
Right. You want all those different kind of guys, and I think they just. I mean, when you talk about they already had 4 or 5 guys in that room that you felt could
Right.
all probably start, then you could, I mean, you could afford to lose one if you had to lose somebody at a position. Obviously, you thought Rodney Hill was very talented, so you would have
Right.
liked him to stay around, of course.
Right.
But,
Absolutely.
it is what it is. And, again, not to speculate, but they're only going to do so much for some people who want
Right.
more things than other people are getting that have already done
Correct.
things on the field. That's about as vague as I can say it. So, like, it is what it is. But I think that's a position you'll be fine because you feel good. And honestly, outside of like turnover problems, you can throw a sophomore in there. You can throw a
Yep.
freshman in there and they can make
Yep.
an impact. So that's a position that I feel like you're okay there. And you feel really good about Cam Davis. You also have Mekhi Danzy coming into
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
four-star running back as well, who I like. So you're
Man.
taking 2 backs in this class. You got Sam Singleton as well. So I think you're fine there. You also have 4-star corner Jamari Howard, who's going to be on
Yep.
campus this weekend, LaWayne McCoy, and Manis Atiati. Man, what
Oh, look at you.
we're getting good because the more guys we get with hard names to pronounce, that means we're straight to the top.
That's
Because
right.
it's like when you watch Clemson, it's like Uyangalale, the Aruka Roa Roa Roa, and it's like the more hard name guys you have to pronounce, I think the better you are. So there's a lot of big names, that they got to lock up this weekend. They've been out doing a lot of in-home visits this week as
Yeah.
well. So I think really right now the main focus is you get the 2 quarterbacks in, you get
Yeah.
a couple of the Georgia transfer in, Marvin Jones Jr. You already got a lot of guys on campus, so it makes sense to
Yep.
bring them in. But I think right now it's all hands on deck to lock down this class, this number 3
Yes.
class. Of course, I'm not sure where the class is going to fit or finally land whenever you do factor Armando Blunt out of there.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if the flip has actually been made official
Not
yet.
yet. Not
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 yet. So
yet.
yeah, so you're still sitting at number 3. We'll just have to see how it shakes out. And of course,
Yeah.
if he does end up flipping and you do end up losing him, but maybe you pull in Jeremiah Smith. There's been rumors that you could flip LJ McCray. I don't know that that's going to be the case. I think LJ
Yeah.
is going to be a guy that maybe you just keep that connection open and maybe you pick him
Yep.
up in the portal like you did Marvin Jones Jr. or you're hopefully going to do here in the near future. So
Yep.
that's pretty much who you're watching right now. That's just some updates. Like I said, you can go back and watch the signing day preview that we did that kind of talks a little bit more about everybody. But there's,
Yeah.
no, of course, it always works out that way, Michael. Every time you drop an episode, something happens right after. So
That's right.
there has been a little bit of the news there as well. That's kind of broke either way. So that's just kind of some of the updates that we're looking at. I don't know if you have anything else that you've heard so far with maybe some developments for this weekend. But yeah, man, so far, I think that you're just hoping that you can keep the rest of the guys in the boat
Yeah.
here.
Yep.
Whatever happens with Blunt happens. I still think you're in it for McCray. I still think you're in it for Jeremiah Smith. And then I think if you can land 2 out of 3 of these transfers, obviously you're not going to take both quarterback transfers,
Yeah.
but if you can kind of get one of them where you
Yeah.
feel really good about him, if you can feel really good about Jones Jr. at the end of the weekend, and maybe you can get that Georgia linebacker in for a visit, man, that would make me feel really, really good about next year. So any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, I would just say the final thought is, man, I think what's super important, with your obviously let's clean that class up. Let's make sure that the kids we got in there now, with the exception of Blunt, because we know that there's probably a high percentage chance he's going to flip. With the exception of Blunt, let's make sure we keep that class together. If we can add 1 or 2 more to that, looking at you again, Jeremiah Smith, come on, man, be a Nole. It'll be the best thing you ever did.
Right.
If we can add that and finish with a top, 5 class, top 3 class, that is huge. That is so big for 2024 recruiting, 2025 recruiting, to see that high school kids actually want to come to Florida State. That's huge. The other thing I'll say finally is defensive line, offensive line. If we want to be able to compete with the Georgias and the Alabamas, we need to shore up the line, because that is what is going to get us to that level, that elite level, that elite. Like every year, Florida State is not just in the national championship conversation, but like pegged to be one of the 4 teams, even though we're going to a 12-team playoff. And I know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring up playoff, but that will be one of those top 4 teams that you're thinking, okay, of the 4 teams or of the 12 teams in the playoff, these 4 teams probably have the best chance at winning it. We've got to get better on the offensive line, got to get better on the defensive line. So whatever Mike Norvell and that staff need to do, whether that's, looking at who's leading that, Alex Atkins, Odell, JP, like let's figure out how to close better on these things. Offensive line, again, you said this so many times, Jesse. You're going to find serviceable offensive linemen. You're not going to find the ones that are program changers through the portal.
Right.
Those you have to recruit from high school and develop. Let's get better at that. Let's get going.
Yeah, I definitely agree, man. I think when you look at the teams like Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Michigan, even Ohio State, it's like, what is the one thing that they all have in common? It's the trenches. I mean, Georgia won 2 national championships with a former walk-on quarterback. But it's because they were so dominant in the trenches that you just couldn't stop them. So, yeah, man, I think that is going to be an area of emphasis going forward that needs to be addressed, obviously. And again, you can supplement things in the portal, but you just want to get to the point where you don't, because what if things tighten down? You know what I mean? What if portal rules all of a sudden change? And there's not that flood of recruits? So you do want to build out of the high school ranks, but it is exciting to be able to get these ready-made guys like Marvin Jones Jr. if you can land him. So, but again, there hasn't been a whole lot in the portal this year, so it's too unpredictable to rely on. You just want to use that to accentuate your class. And you do get D.D. Holmes, 4-star defensive lineman in this one. That's a guy that I do like. You get Jamori Flagg, a 3-star. That's the one that Taylor had told me he thinks is very underrated. A guy that Odell really likes. So you have some pieces that you're going to be able to work with. Like I said, you got Keith Sampson, a 4-star defensive lineman from I think it was last year's class that they did really like there too, from North Carolina. I think it was North Carolina like player of the year. So you got some young guys that are coming up. But man, you just need a game changer because we always talk about how you see the difference it made when you had a dominant defensive line this year. So you really got to elevate that as well. But, you're just right now, if you can lock everybody up, man, you got the quarterback of your future along with Brock Glenn coming in that, Brock Glenn's already here. Coach, you get Croman Hawk coming in. You got one of the best, if not the best DB classes ever in the history of ever that you could sign, as long as you can hold KJ and all those guys. So, I mean, you're going to put DBU back on the map.
Yeah, you
just need those guys in that front 7, especially on defense where it's been lacking, that you need to try and address that as well. Obviously, you got 2 linebackers in this class, 3-star Tamir Hickmans-Collins, and then Jaden Pears, 3-star out of Delray Beach, Florida. So, again, you got some guys, and you still like Blake Nicholson, and you still like Omar Graham Jr., but, man, if you could get a couple of veteran pieces to go around them, I think it would take you a long way this season. So, yeah, man, if there's any more updates between now and early signing day, obviously we'll jump back on to get you guys up to speed. But right now, that's really all I've heard so far. So just be prepared for the blunt flip. And then, I think you still keep Jeremiah Smith. I think you still keep McCray on your radar, maybe, hopefully. And then you just never know. I mean, if they can get the Amari Williams kid that reclassified, if they can get him to commit too, I think that would be really huge as well. Man, that's the thing about Norvell and them. I will give it to them. They play chess. Like,
yes, they do.
I'm sure they know certain things. I mean, they even had, what was it when Hunter bounced or whatever, and they were like, "Hey, Armella, let's go ahead and lock this up." And so you get, he had a backup plan to get another guy in the class. So
that's right.
If you could make this happen, I think it kind of calms the waves a little bit. But I think we're both in agreement here that there's no point in panicking yet. I think as long as you don't see any more signing day surprises outside of the ones that were kind of expected there with Armando Blunt. And then I think as long as you can grab a couple guys out of the portal, like you said, if we get to the spring portal session and we haven't locked anybody up yet, I'm gonna be sweating a little. I'm gonna be sweating a little bit.
Exactly.
So I think for right now, you just all hands on deck for early signing day next Wednesday, the 20th. I think you get ready to lock that class up, and then you see what you can do this weekend with some of the bigger name transfers that you have on board. So with that being said, guys, we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. And then, like I said, if we find any other news or updates or anything like that in the meantime, we will jump back on with you guys. We've been putting out a bunch of stuff lately, so go check that out. We got early signing day portal preview. I got a DJ Uyunglele. I'm gonna say it till I get it, till I nail it. So we got a video on him out right now. And then we also have another video that me and Michael did just yesterday about what is strength of schedule anyway? And we do a deep dive on why there's a little bit more to that number than
Correct.
than meets the eye. So you guys make sure to go check that out. Like and subscribe if you've watched this long. We appreciate you tuning in. This video today is going to be brought to you by our sponsor, Alumni Hall FSU.
Let's
Great
go.
FSU gear and merch. Christmas is coming up. You can knock
That's
every
right.
Nole off your list and get it done at a great price. 10% off using code SPEAR, 1817 Thomasville Road. If you're in Tallahassee, alumnihall.com is the website. You guys make sure to check them out. Support the ones that support us. And thank you so much, guys. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll be back with you next week. Go Noles.
Go Noles.